Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Ending Position Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. Today, we're going to talk about what I'm calling the in-between emotions. And, if you're listening, I, like you, am a practicing physician. I consider myself a recovering perfectionist. I would like to be a recovering workaholic, but I don't feel like I can quite call myself that yet. And today's topic really sort of came out of this observation that I had about feelings of boredom and restlessness. So let's get into it. I'm highlighting several what I'll call emotion triplets here. And these are different relationships that I see related to emotions that sort of triangulate, if you will. And, of course, I am not a psychologist. I do not have a PhD in emotions, but as a physician, I am around people's emotions all the time, right? As a parent, I am very, very closely witnessing the emotional changes in my children. And as somebody who's highly empathic myself, like I really feel other people's emotions. And so to me, this conversation matters because when we are more in touch with the emotions and sort of have a better understanding of where they come from, how they relate to each other, I think it gives us more, I hate to use the word resilience, but it gives us more flexibility. It gives us more ability to get curious about what we're feeling, to notice. If you've listened to the podcast before, you've listened to other physician coaches out there, especially trained with the Life Coach School or a similar sort of cognitive behavioral type approach, you'll know that our thoughts create our feelings, which drive our actions, right? And so this conversation about emotions, we're really focusing on the feelings, the emotions, which are kind of in the middle of that equation, because we've got underlying thoughts that are often conscious or sometimes subconscious thoughts. And that's creating an emotion in us, right? Which is people describe as some kind of a sensation in our body or some kind of a vibration. And that creates our actions, right? My actions coming out of irritability, anxiousness, joy, excitement, fear, right? Those all drive different actions, though I may be in the exact same situation. So let's talk a little bit about these triplets, for lack of a better term that I'm using. And these are patterns that I notice in my life. So if some of these don't seem like they have a relationship in your life, of course, that's okay. But I invite you, especially if you've never sort of thought about it before, to just consider whether or not this pattern is also going on for you, because I don't think that I'm out in left field here with connecting these emotions to one another. But again, I am not a psychologist. So here we go. I was thinking in particular for myself of feelings of boredom or restlessness. And of course, I notice this in myself periodically, especially around times where I'm sort of waiting for someone else to do something. So it might be that I'm going to see a patient, but they haven't arrived yet, and they're running a little bit late, or maybe they didn't do the form that is somewhat necessary for me to see them, or maybe I'm waiting for my kids to get in the tub or out of the tub, or something along these lines. I'll often find myself feeling bored and restless. And, there's this sense of, usually for me, like I don't necessarily want to start a new project or pick up a book because I know I'm about to be interrupted, but there's just this kind of negative feeling in the middle, right? This boredom, this restlessness. And as I thought about it more, the sensation of boredom or restlessness lies between two other emotions. One that I have felt quite frequently, being hurried, being busy, being overwhelmed maybe. and an emotion that I would like to feel more of in my life, which would be calm or restful. Interestingly, as we kind of think about these relationships, right, between I'm gonna go with one emotion. So because I'm giving you sort of multiple on each level, if you will. But if if at one level I'm busy, right? If that's kind of the top negative emotion, busy in a kind of a negative way, in a difficult way. And in between that is restlessness. And at the other end is calm, right? If we sort of see that as again, a triangulation or, a spectrum of, one emotion on one side, one emotion on the other. If I am trying to get out of feeling overly busy more often and get to more of a sense of calm more often, there's probably going to need to be more work with the emotion of boredom or restlessness, meaning that I'm probably going to have to be willing to feel that emotion in order to get more calm in my life. Now, I know that sounds a little bit weird, but when we are used to overworking, being very busy, having people constantly sort of need us and you don't come to us with questions, or you need to do this, you need to do that. If that's your default and what you want in your life is more calm, there's going to have to be you accepting a certain level of discomfort with the absence of doing things, the boredom, the restlessness. Because we imagine that if people stop asking me to do things, right, if there aren't charts to close, if there aren't patients to see, if there aren't kids to coordinate, fill in your busyness here. If that stuff just wasn't happening, we might imagine we would automatically feel calm. But if our nervous system is conditioned to constantly feel busy, overwhelmed, hurried, rushed, the absence of those things, those circumstances, right, the people needing us, doesn't create calm. In fact, it probably creates some discomfort if there's quote unquote nothing to do, right? And that feeling, that discomfort, right, is boredom, is restlessness, because we're so used to doing, right? That busy hurriedness. And what we want is calm. What we want is a sense of ease and relaxation. But we don't move from busy, hurry into just magically calm. Our bodies are too used to feeling busy, right? Again, it sounds a little strange to think about it, but I see this a lot where people are wanting, physicians are wanting to feel calm. But when we get to that place where we might feel bored or restless, let's say you have an afternoon to yourself, there's nothing to do, there's no demands on your time, and you want to feel calm, but suddenly you find yourself giving yourself assignments and tasks because your body and your brain are so used to doing that you can't tolerate the calm. You can't tolerate the absence of things. There's part of you that feels that that's wrong. Again, that's this boredom or restlessness. I think that we have to be willing to sit in that sensation, to be able to feel bored without trying to fix it, without trying to do something about it, without creating more busyness if we want to feel calm, right? There's a relearning of our nervous system that has to happen there. And it may not be, so wired into your nervous system, but for so many of us, it really is. We're just so conditioned to be in the busy that we lack the ability to be in the calm without some practice. Let's move into another one of these triplets. So the middle emotion here, I'll call frustration or resentment. Okay. And what I'm putting at sort of the top negative emotion underlying the frustration or the resentment is a sense of feeling undervalued. And often what we are wanting is to feel valued, to feel generous, to feel like we have bandwidth, perhaps. So let's unpack this triplet a little bit more. When we are feeling resentful or frustrated, what's typically going on? I know for me, if let's say my kids are asking me to do all sorts of things, including all sorts of things that they are now old enough to do on their own. Can you tell I've had a bit of a weekend? Parenting is not always my favorite role. But if I'm feeling frustrated or resentful, what's underlying that is, sensations that maybe they don't value me, that maybe they think I don't have anything to do, that I'm just here to serve them, that they don't need to exert any effort, especially, if it's inconvenient or boring, like pouring their own glass of milk or, I don't know, fill in the blank there, right? Coming up with some activity for them if they feel bored. So frequent, Mom, I'm bored. Yeah, it's not my problem. I'm not bored. But if I'm feeling undervalued, right? If I'm feeling like they don't think that I'm important or that I might be doing something else, right? Then that's leading me to have this emotion of frustration or resentment. And really what I want is to feel valued or generous. It's an interesting pairing. This one works a little bit differently, right? But if I want to move from feeling undervalued, right, to feeling valued or to feeling generous, like I have capacity, right, to play with them, or I don't know, well, they should pour their own milk, really. They're old enough. I have to pause in the frustration or resentment. I have to notice what's going on, right? And I have to get aware of my thoughts. So in that context, right, if I'm feeling like every time they make a request that I have to honor it, and maybe, I don't know, maybe that's tied up in my sense of value as a mom. I know for a lot of working mom physicians, we often feel like we spend so little time with our kids that maybe when we're with them, we need to give them everything. I would argue that that's not true and that's not healthy, but have I absolutely felt that way? Absolutely 100%, right? So if in that moment, my immediate reaction to them asking me for something is to feel frustrated, there's a sense of me assuming that I need to do whatever they request in order to feel good enough. That's kind of, again, sort of that undervalued sort of thing. There's my feelings towards them maybe not respecting what I'm doing for myself. But really what I ultimately want, right, is to feel valued. So I've got a little bit of work to do on my own thoughts as relates to this sense. And again, this triplet is a little bit different from the first one, but it's an opportunity when we feel frustrated or resentful to figure out, do I need a boundary here? Is there something I need to communicate to somebody else? Because often when I'm feeling frustrated or resentful, there's a boundary that needs to be there, and it's not currently there. In this instance, my kids should know that as long as they haven't just broken their arm, right, and they're in a cast, they're able to pour their own milk. Like there really isn't any circumstance where they're not. With the exception, yeah, okay, if the milk gallon jug is full, right, that's a little hard for my younger child. Okay, he can ask me for help there. But if I continue to think that when they ask me to do something, it's because they don't value me, then I'm going to stay stuck in this loop. And I don't want to be there, right? So it takes me adjusting some of my automatic thoughts about how I respond to their requests. And, if I want to step into more of that generosity, of that feeling valued, right? How do I cultivate thoughts, right, that are going to let me go there? Um, you know, it may be, let's see, I have to think about my, my own example there. That that circumstance, right? Really, it's the opportunity for the boundary. They can get their own milk, right? They can ask me for help if they need it, but I do want them to notice if I'm busy. If I'm already in the kitchen and I don't know, I'm already doing something, then yeah, perhaps that's easier. But a lot of the time, that's not what's going on. If we think about this in the context of patient care, right, where I'm feeling frustrated or resentful, let's say we have a circumstance where I've just spent, the visit with the patient. Maybe we're even running a little overtime as happens. And they keep asking me questions or they produce a form that needs to be filled out that they didn't mention before. Oh, can we fill out this form? We need this for school tomorrow. That's another common instance, right, where I'm feeling frustrated or resentful. And again, my default thinking goes along the lines of they don't value my time because why didn't they bring that up sooner? I don't have a magic printer in my hand that magically completes the form, right? Think about these, endless school forms, right? For family medicine, for pediatrics, you know what I'm talking about, right? These forms, let's say, so they can have medications in school, and they need the same thing repeated sometimes when they're going to go on a field trip, right? So they can self-administer medications. Even if it's Tylenol or ibuprofen, right? I have to complete a form. There's an opportunity here for a boundary to be in place. But again, my default thinking is that if there's a request that's coming in, that means I have to honor that request just because somebody asked me, right? In that circumstance, let's say there is a simple form and it's about the child being able to take, I don't know, their daily allergy medicine while they go on an overnight field trip, right? Not their EpiPen, just their Claritin or whatever, right? What I might do in that circumstance is to have the parent step out into the lobby, right, and complete the form. And then they're going to have to wait until I'm done with my next patient if they want me to sign it. So, or I could say, you have to drop that off at the front desk and we'll have it ready for you tomorrow. Depending on the circumstance, in the family, I might just sign the form and say, will you please fill in the details? I might just write, Claritin 10 milligrams, and then sign my name and say, you need to fill out all the rest of this information or take it out to the front desk. There are different ways to handle that. But so long as I feel like I can't have any boundaries, I'm never going to feel generous or valued. So again, sort of think about this relationship. And I love pointing this out to people. When we are feeling frustrated or resentful, that particularly is often an opportunity for a boundary. And it has to do with us feeling like somebody is not respecting us, not valuing us, and us having sort of default thinking along the lines of, I have to do everything that the patient requests. I have to do everything that my kids request. Fill in the blanks for your own situation. Okay, let's look at another one that I came up with. The emotion in the middle is anger. And this one sort of comes out of some awareness we have, right? That when someone is having an anger reaction, anger is considered a secondary emotion. All right. That much I've gleaned from all my reading and emotions. Anger is a second emotion, and it's often covering up something that's more primary. Common would be fear or threat, right? If I'm afraid of something or I'm feeling threatened, I may have an anger response. Let me think of a circumstance. Um, ooh, I'm gonna have to edit out some pause here. I should have come up with this before. Where would I be feeling fearful or threatened? Okay, I'm going to give an example of my patient tells me that they have been taking some compounded medications without telling me. And they're now telling me, and this happened to me earlier this week, where she told me she was taking basically compounded tirzepatide, which is the generic name for Zepbound, which is one of our newer weight loss medications. She had been on this when we had talked about her labs before, which she had some prediabetes. And she'd had some prediabetes several years ago. This is a convoluted story, but she told me this week that she had been taking that compounded tirzepatide, getting it off the internet as people do. And so she hadn't started on the medications that I had prescribed for her. So I had given her some metformin, I had given her some torvastatin. She didn't start those because she didn't tell me about the tirzepatide. And when she got home, she realized that she was not sure if there might be some interactions, Granted, didn't ask me about any interactions with any of her other medications that she's on chronically already. This was just out of the conversation. And, I did notice that I initially felt a little bit angry that she hadn't mentioned it to me. I mean, we'd had a whole 30-minute conversation about her abnormal labs. And this is someone who has been struggling with some relatively young onset memory issues and a family history of young onset Alzheimer's. She's been very worried about her memory, but meanwhile, didn't disclose that her prior labs had, showed high cholesterol and prediabetes years ago. Again, this is a convoluted patient and story, to be quite honest. But as she said, "Oh yeah, I've been taking this compounded tirzepatide," like immediately I felt a little angry. And I didn't have a big public reaction, to her. But what's underlying that is that there's a part of me that was a little bit afraid, right? Of like, oh no, is there going to be some problems? Is there going to be some interaction here? Because when our patients tell us that they're taking medications and have been taking medications for a while that they didn't disclose to us before, we suddenly feel like we're under threat sometimes, right? Because, I've been prescribing these other things and I didn't know about this random stuff you've been getting off the internet, right? I mean, this happens with testosterone too, right? There's all sorts of medications that people are just getting in random places. And, in the instance of tirzepatide, that wasn't likely to interfere with anything that we were talking about. But still, let's say she had some kind of a bad outcome, right? And I didn't know what she was taking. And let's say that there could have been some interactions with the medications that she was on. And again, I didn't know about it. I would have immediate sort of fear about that because what if I got named in a lawsuit, even though I had nothing to do with it? I don't know. Have physicians been sued because they were not aware of medications that patients didn't disclose that they were taking? And some bad outcome, probably. And I don't feel like I did anything wrong there, but you can see, right, our intense fear of lawsuits, of litigation, because we know that we don't even necessarily have to do anything wrong to be named in a lawsuit. That underlies the anger, right? Fear, threat. Now, in that particular circumstance, I know that molecule, tirzepatide, doesn't really interfere with other medications. There aren't really interactions. It's just kind of a different beast. But there could have been any number of things that she was, taking that there might have been interactions. There might have been dangerous interactions. So we've got this anger response, right? And the anger response is pointing to something that's underlying it. And my desire in my practice, right, in the practice of medicine, is to feel safe, is to feel valued, respected, to feel like I have the knowledge to take care of somebody safely. To feel, I mean, this is something that we don't necessarily have. I'd like to feel safe from litigation. Now, I don't control whether or not somebody, puts a malpractice suit in front of me. I don't control that. What I do control, right, is how I choose to operate, how I choose to take care of patients, the sort of the risks that we take, frankly, because we are taking risks every time we see a patient, to be quite honest. But as long as I feel like I'm practicing with integrity and, ethically, my chances, right, I'm controlling my chances as much as possible. But again, in this situation, right, what I want is to feel safe in knowing that I have the knowledge to be able to safely provide care for my patient. And when she disclosed that she was taking something that she hadn't told me about before, right, I've got this in between emotion of anger because underlying that, I'm feeling threatened. I'm feeling like, oh, you've just put me at high risk here to be sued, even though, again, this is our irrational brain. Just thinking that we're always on the verge of being sued, which, is probably not really the circumstance. But you can see here how anger is in between these other emotions. And with all of these little triplets that we've been talking about, there's an opportunity that when we notice these in between emotions, right? Boredom or restlessness, frustration or resentment, anger, that there's some pause there to be made to find out what's underlying that, right? There's a different emotion, right, that this is covering up, and this feels like it's keeping me from the emotion that I want, right? Feelings of calm, feelings of being valued, feelings of being safe or respected. It's really important that we're able to see these relationships, right? Because often we won't have adequate information if we just feel those in between emotions and we don't get a little curious there, right? If I'm feeling resentful, right, that's an opportunity for me to pause, to notice what's going on, right? To notice that I'm feeling undervalued, to question what those thoughts are, and be able to figure out, do I need a boundary here, right? When I'm feeling restless or bored, right? Again, I want to pause. I want to notice that my brain and my body are used to being hurried and busy, and it's uncomfortable to think that I could rest or be calm, but I'm never going to get to calm unless I can tolerate that discomfort of boredom and restlessness and probably have some new thoughts there, that it is okay to not do anything, that it is okay to not be productive, quote unquote. I'm going to need to go through that in order to get to a place where I can feel more calm more often. If I want to feel valued and respected, right, I'm going to need to understand sometimes what my anger is coming from, rather than just judging it and feeling like, oh, I shouldn't be angry, or I don't know, just blaming the patient, right? How dare she not tell me? Well, I can think of a million reasons why she didn't tell me, right? Um, I'm sorry that she didn't tell me. Thankfully, nothing bad has happened to her, but I can see where my brain just went to, ooh, you might be unsafe here, right? Because you're a physician, you can get sued. You can get sued for a bad outcome that you have nothing to do with, quite frankly, right? If I want to feel valued and respected, I'm going to have to accept that some of the time I'm not going to have all the information, and I'm going to have to trust myself that I act ethically, that I do the best I can with the information that I have, that I try and be thorough and complete, and to still accept that some people are not going to be telling me the truth about what's going on. That's just the reality. That's just the practice of medicine. If you work in a field where nobody ever lies to you or fudges the truth or doesn't, tell you all their medications, I question what's that specialty. It's probably one that doesn't have any contact with patients. But I'm curious now, so let me know. When we are in a place of wanting to have fewer hours, few hours spent in difficult emotions, we're going to need to be able to sort of navigate these triplets, these hierarchies, whatever you want to call them, right? We need to think of them, maybe a spectrum is kind of a more appropriate term, right? We don't just go from feeling hurried and busy to calm, right? There are stages in between that we have to cross through. And it's going to involve some reframing of the thoughts that we have, because otherwise default brain is going to say, listen, who you are is somebody who keeps busy. And if you're not busy, then you're not being valuable. If you're not being valuable, then people are going to know that you're less than, right? It's that whole imposter syndrome cycle. And all you want to do is rest. We have to reframe our thoughts about times that we aren't doing anything in order to feel calm, right? We have to move through that to be able to get there. I'm going to wrap us up here, but I hope you can see how the relationship between these different emotions is working. And, I invite you to reach out to me and, I don't know, share your thoughts with me. You can email me at Megan, MEGAN, at healthierforgood.com. I'm curious to see what you think about these spectrums, these triplets, whatever we want to call them, because I'm going to have to chew on this a little bit more for myself as well. But really, it's about growing through what we have experienced before, right? So many of us have been spending years and years feeling overwhelmed, overworked, feeling like we have this workaholic perfectionist streak, right? And for so many of us, it is wired into our nervous system that that's the only way that we are valuable. And we need to unlearn that. And so understanding the relationships between these different emotions that come up is really important, right? If you can't see that feelings of boredom and restlessness sort of have to come in between, feeling hurried, busy, overwhelmed, and feeling calm, then you have to learn how to allow the boredom, allow the restlessness to be there. I just don't think there's any other way. But again, if you're smarter than I am and you have a different way, then I'm very curious to know what your answer is. My friends, thank you as always for tuning in. I want to give a quick shout out to one of my listeners up in Canada for becoming a paid subscriber to the podcast. As I have mentioned before, you can support the show by making a small monthly contribution. That helps to offset some of the costs that are associated with producing the show. I have to, pay the Buzzsprout people to host the podcast so it can be out on the podcast players. I have to pay for some of the equipment that I use to record. I don't pay myself for recording for you, but that's okay. Pay myself for plenty of other things. So if you would like to become a paid subscriber, I would love to have you join, and you can click the little button at the bottom of the show notes that says support the show. $3, $5 a month. Anything that you choose to contribute is really, really helpful. And it helps me to avoid the temptation of putting ads in here. I really don't want to put ads in here. But, I do want to make sure that I'm valuing my own time. And I hope that you do as well. That's it. I'll stop asking. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great week. And until next time.